Welcome to episode 23 of Dark Academia Queen. If you're new here, hit that like button, ring that bell for notification, and please hit that subscribe button, help a girl out. Um, Today we're going to be talking about a rabbit hole I went down. So, I was trying to find some haunted places in the US that are worth visiting to add to my travel bucket list. I came across this list. So I came, and it was at 13 haunted places, and this place is actually on there. This is the Blue Anchor that's located in Delray Beach, Florida. It's a centuries old facade and interior details that was shipped straight from London. It is a British pub and a favorite local watering hole. It is said to be haunted by the ghost of Bertha Starkley. She was a Londoner who lived in the bar at its original location in England. According to the story, she met her untimely death at the hands of her husband. The owners of the Blue Anchor report hearing footsteps and the sounds of banging pots and pans in after hours. Now, the Blue Anchor has a rich history of being haunted, but built in London in the 1840s during Jack the Ripper times, Bertha Stockley lived above the bar with her husband, who was gone for long lengths of time due to work. And even in one night, while her husband was away, Bertha invited a gentleman over, and her husband came home early, found the two in a compromising position, and murdered them both. For over a century, the pub was haunted by a ghost of the young Bertha Starkey. Years later, the bar was razed in London, but its facade and rich wood interior features were disseminated and shipped to New York City. They were there stored until 1996 when they brought to Delray Beach along with the ghost of Berta. And to this day, Delray Beach footsteps can hear footsteps at night after closing the candle lights and extinguish them, along with banging pots and pans and the sounds of Berta wailing. So, on the evening of September 29th, 1888, two ladies departed from the Blue Anchor pub into a foggy evening who were Elizabeth Stride and upon further research, I actually found a true crime case on this. I'm not going to go into too much detail on it, because that's more for my True Crime Lounge podcast. But I will talk a little bit about the victims of these crimes I found. And this is on the evening of September 29th, 1888, where two ladies departed from the Blue Anchor pub into a foggy evening. Elizabeth Stride and Catherine Eddowes, though they were the only looking for a customer to pay for a few minutes of pleasure and had an appointment with fate on the streets that evening. Around 1 a.m. the next morning, Stride's body was found ravished, and Eddowes mutilated and disfigured, cut open in a ferocious surgical precision. And it was discovered nearby 45 minutes later. Now, if you recall, Jack the Ripper was the most known serial killer at this time, although it's still identified who the murderer really is. But this one stuck right here. In the doors of the Blue Anchor pub on Chancery Lane, off the Fleet Street in London, would remain open into a journalist, baristas, ladies of the evening, and perhaps Jack the Ripper himself. For many decades, they followed before they closed for good to the London traffic in the mid 1960s. Now, with roughly a decade of closing, the doors would reopen for customers along the Atlantic Avenue in Delray Beach, Florida. When the pub was torn down to allow a widening project of Chancery Lane, an American developer purchased the exterior of the mid 19th century public house with an authentic exterior. The Blue Anchor reopened in 1996 and quickly became a popular watering hole for journalists and for many of American media, publisher of the tabloid magazine and the National Enquirer. Along with imported ales, beers, and many available at the bar, there is one spirit that is apparently imported from there. with the original parts only available when she decides to appear. Seafaring tradition holds that sailors drinking at the pub call it the Blue Anchor before embarking on a journey to the sea. Perhaps this is the reason that Berta Starkey was at the Blue Anchor and her seafarer husband, that fateful night, and that she was stabbed by him in a fit of jealousy. Of course, no one knew that Berta's spirit would eventually go seafaring, as her spirit supposedly followed the pub's exterior to Florida. I've actually read stories about this, like spirits following like all transcontinental and everything. Very interesting, actually. A sous chef at the restaurant, Berta one evening with a heavy 30-gallon pot hanging from a hook above the stove, unhooked itself, and fell upon him, knocking him down. Not long after, the owner and the head chef, later veiled woman, walked through the bar. Staff members heard footsteps, seemingly coming from upstairs, and though the bar is only one story, legends associates the activity with Berta Starkey through the activity that can also be connected to various former patrons and the staff who walked through a heavy oaks of the Blue Anchor to escape the foggy streets of London, and is now an exit the palm tree lines of the Delray Beach. So, you remember I said something. So you remember I spoke to you about one of the victims. Well, one of the victims was Elizabeth Stride, and Stride was is believed to have been the third victim of an unidentified serial killer known as Jack the Ripper, who killed and mutilated at least 5 women at Whitechapel in the Spitalfields districts of London, and in the districts of London from late August to early November 1888. And unlike the other four can- canonical rippers, Stride had not been mutilated following her murder, leading some historians to suspect that Stride had not actually been murdered by Jack the Ripper. However, her murder occurred less than 1 hour before the murder of Ripper's fourth victim, Catherine Eddowes. When she was within walking distance, and her act of murder is suspected to have been disturbed by an individual entering the crime scene upon a two-wheel cart. In addition, both women have been murdered and slashed in the throat, leading most authors and researchers to consider Stride to be a third of Ripper's 5 victims. Stride was nicknamed Lone Liz. Now, several explanations have begun to give her pseudonym. Some believe that it was sources from a marriage surname, while others believe that it is a reference to either her height or her general facial expressions. Now, a little bit about Catherine Eddowes. Again, I am not going to really talk about like the case itself, mainly because that's more of a true crime lounge case, and I might actually talk about that one later on in the future. I do gotta finish my season 4, so I'm very excited to get that done, but I have a lot of to be done cases that I really need to get done. It's kind of like my TBR pile of books to be read, that I have to read. We all have it. We all do. But now we have Catherine Eddowes, and she was born April 14th, 1842 in Grassley Green, Wolverhampton. At the time of her death, she was 5 feet tall, had hazel eyes, and dark auburn hair. She had a tattoo of blue ink on her left forearm TC. And at the time of her death, she was suffering from Bright's disease, which is a form of uremia. And friends spoke of Catherine as high intelligent, scholarly woman, but one who possessed as a fierce temper. What do y'all think of the Blue Anchor? Would you go to it? If anybody's been there and had experience with it, let me know. I am curious because I really am gonna add this place to my travel bucket list. But it's also very interesting to notice like disturbing haunting tale.